thank you for tuning in to the Speak, Inspire, Love, and Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Jeanette Ortegon. Join us as we take a deep dive into the root cause of leader and subordinate conflict. A toxic work environment creates stress and unnecessary tension on hardworking employees whose only intention is to show up every day and do a great job. Our vision is to work with mid-level managers on becoming more of an influencer in the daily lives of their teams rather than an authority. Leaders are not recognized for how they advance individually. They are commemorated on the quality of leaders they cultivate professionally. We also use this platform to share stories of personal growth and resiliency. What was the most difficult struggle you encountered, and how did you get through it? Perspective is everything. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today on the Speak, Inspire, Love, and Leadership podcast. We have an amazing guest for you today. I have Mr. Daniel McGhee. He is the author of Chasing a Flawed Sun. In this book, he just lays out his entire journey with heroin addiction and alcohol addiction. And ladies and gentlemen, he survived it all. He has touched so many lives. I mean, he has been a great inspiration to so many other people who are going through the same demons that were chasing him during his journey. So without further ado, I'm going to let Danny explain his amazing journey. I'm sure someone on the other side of this microphone is going to be inspired and touched by his journey. So without further ado, Danny, I'm going to ask you to just kind of give us a little bio about yourself before we go into the actual interview.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jeanette. I'm Daniel McGhee. As you said, I'm an ex-addict, an ex-alcoholic, and an author. I don't like to identify solely as those things. I see a lot of people, they get in recovery and they spend the rest of their lives identifying as only an addict. I wanted to break through those boundaries, and I wanted to be so much more. It will always be a part of my story, but I'm also a business owner. I've owned a bail bonds company for 12 years. I'm on a real estate investment firm. I do real estate, buying and selling. I'm an author, as we said. I work for a treatment center. I own a nonprofit. I'm a husband. I'm a son. I'm a brother. And I've got a lot of other titles. And so I'm just trying to live life to the fullest. And I'm trying to live the opposite way that I used to every day of my life.
Wow. I read this book when I was in Korea. I ordered the book and I read it, and I'm like, it just kind of touched me so much because I am the child of a recovering addict growing up in South Central Los Angeles. My sister and my brother, myself, we were subject to a lot of the things that drug addicts put their children through. No fault of the children. We're just kind of subject to some of the behaviors of our surroundings. But first thing I want to ask you, Danny, what grew your curiosity into drugs? I mean, what was that? I mean, you started at a very young age. So what grew your curiosity? I mean, maybe your other friends were out playing basketball, football, joining different type of civic teams at school. I mean, what took you down that path?
Well, I'm not the typical what people envision when they envision a child that gets involved in drugs, because I came from a 2-parent home. I lived in a maybe lower middle class suburb, and I had a good upbringing. I had 2 parents that never touched drugs. I came up from a good home with 2 parents that met each other in high school and married. They never had drug addiction. There's no drug addiction in my family. And I was little, For my age and for my size, I was smaller than all my friends. I had a big heart. I was into nature and I was a caring child. And I felt like in order to fit in, I had to be a different person. And so at a very young age, I started watching gangster movies and listening to gangster rap and trying to emulate this persona of something that I wasn't. I was a screw off in school and a class clown and was fighting with other people and just trying to fit in with these older kids in my neighborhood instead of hanging with the kids my age, the ones that were involved in sports and things like that. I was just drawn to the other side. And it was just something inside of me. It wasn't an external impression upon myself. It was something in me that led me to those things. And so at a very early age, I found out that alcohol made me the person that I wanted to be. I was too shy around women, girls, I should say at that age. I was too shy around females when I was sober. I didn't want to hurt people physically when I was sober. But if I took a drink of alcohol, suddenly I had the courage to approach females. Suddenly I had the courage to walk up to somebody and punch them. It made me into this person that I thought I had to be to fit in. And when the alcohol wore off, I was back to the same old kind little kid that I was. And so in essence, I drank as much as I could all the time to be this person that I thought I had to be.
Wow. So the alcohol and the drugs that kind of, like you mentioned, it gave you courage. You thought you had to be this particular person. And the alcohol and the drugs, it basically made you that person. And I'm sure at some point when your peers, maybe family members started seeing this change in behavior, they were very concerned. I mean, wow. I mean, peer groups. I mean, so you mentioned you came from a well-rounded family, right? Those external things that you experienced that got you into this, it was not a part, it wasn't a reflection of what was on the inside of your home.
Right, right. And it wasn't the influence of the friends that I hung out with. I sought that out. So many parents blame the friends. You're hanging around with the wrong group. Well, we choose to hang around that group. I chose to want to be a drug dealer when I grew up. I chose to want to be a gangster. I chose to want to be a tough guy. The alcohol just catapulted that. Now, I hadn't even gotten drugs yet. I sold drugs. I wanted to be a drug dealer, not a drug user. I won't get that crisscross. The drug use came later on in life. I initially, at a young age, I wanted to be in the mob. But I watched all these mobster movies and I realized, you know what, I'm Irish. I'm not Italian. I'm never going to be in the mob. So instead, I started watching gang movies and I wanted to be a street thug and I wanted to be a drug dealer. And movies like New Jack City. I'm dating myself.
Nino Brown.
Yeah, dating myself now, Colors. I watch movies like that. And I said, that's what I want to be. That was my aspiration. Children want to be electrical engineers and presidents, and that's what I wanted to be. So the alcohol was a catapult for that because it took away vision, it took away my shyness, and I became what I wanted to be. At 15, in the book, at 15 years old, I left my parents' house. They couldn't control me. I moved to a Section 8 neighborhood with a bunch of people and started selling crack. 15 years old, I had the gold rings on every finger. I had the golds in my mouth, and I thought I was everything that I wanted to be. I thought I had a clear vision of where I was going in life. Didn't think about 20 years down the road. I was thinking about then. And it wasn't until, I hurt a lot of people. That whole first chapter in the book was about all the innocent people that I hurt.
Yes.
And it's my own ego. It was disgusting. But at the time, I was a monster. My ego was a monster that had to be fed. I thought I had to be this person. It wasn't until I was 17 or 18 and I met an older woman that was using heroin. Because as a drug dealer, I always looked down on so-called crackheads and junkies and disrespected them and looked down on them. And it wasn't until I met this older woman and I tried heroin that I realized that it numbed all the pain from all the wreckage and all the damage that I had caused through my alcohol use.
So you had a conscience, but you used the drugs, the heroin, to kind of remove that bad feeling that, man, I'm destroying all these people's lives. But hey, this thing over here, it just makes it all better. What was the point, Danny, that you realized that you were in trouble with your addiction? I mean, you surrounded yourself, like you mentioned, you surrounded yourself with those people who can, masquerade the pain and kind of cover up all those negative things that you were going through. But I mean, at what point did you realize that, hey, I'm in trouble?
So the whole time that I was drinking, my ego was in charge. I thought I had everything on lock. I was heading down this path and I was going to be the king of New York. You know what I mean? Selling crack, beating people up, robbing people, all this stuff. And when I would come to, I would feel that guilt and I would drown that guilt out with more alcohol instantly. I was fully addicted to alcohol. When I finally stopped drinking alcohol, I went through severe withdrawals, tremors and hallucinations and all that. The heroin, when I say in the book that heroin saved my life, I say that because it took my ego away from me. I was heading down a crash course to hell. I was going to kill somebody or kill myself for sure with alcohol. When I found the heroin, it humbled me. It took away my ego. It took away my pain. It was within weeks that I was fully addicted and I had lost complete control of myself.
Wow.
So when I was drinking, I was under the illusion that I had control. But heroin completely destroyed that illusion and that control and everything. Now, here I was, Mr. Big Bad Tough Guy, being controlled by a little powder, and I couldn't function without it.
Wow. And in the book, you talk about you experienced a lot of close calls with basically others losing their lives around you. And that wasn't enough to change you. I mean, because apparently God was not ready for you. I mean, you tried many times to get to the gate, but he like, nope, not yet. You got much more to do. And a little later, we'll talk about all those much mores that you have done, giving back to the community on some of the amazing things that you have done, even for the quake victims in Haiti. We'll touch on that. But all these things, the story about Corey, Mick, and, the other passenger. I mean, wow, I'm like, this dude should have been a doctor, because that was like, I mean, I think I read that story, those few pages, like maybe several times. I'm like, wow, this is, even though you were under the influence of drugs and alcohol at that time, you saved lives. I mean, at that particular moment, you saved 3 lives.
Right. I've definitely
So Danny, that wasn't enough. That particular incident right there in that car driving, that wasn't enough to say, you know what, that's it, I'm done.
Right. There's so many things I could say about that because in street lore in Baltimore, amongst the junkie and heroin community, it's commonly known that if there is a batch of heroin that's killing people, everybody wants that particular batch of heroin because they know its potency. When you've reached a point in life where you're completely controlled by a substance and you have no control, you have no ego, no self-confidence, no will to live. So death is like a vacation. Like if it happens, it happens. And at some points in my life, I hoped it would happen. And as you know, at some points in my life, I tried to make it happen and failed.
Yeah.
Because I was too much of a coward to do it in a surefire way, like with a gun or with a rope or something like that. But heroin was the easiest way to go. And so at certain times I fired as much as I could. And somehow every time I woke up, which is why I do what I do today. And we'll get to that. But there is nothing, if anything should scare somebody straight, it's not the idea of death, because death is the ultimate ending that comes for all of us one day. It's the idea of going back in and out of jail and prison over and over and over and over again after you swear that you're never going to do it. It's the idea of waking up sick every single morning. But even that doesn't stop an addict from getting high, because all it takes is one more blast to make all of those feelings go away and all those fears go away. See, heroin numbs all of our anxiety, all of our fears, all of our physical, mental, any type of pain. It makes it go away. So rather than facing the music or facing whatever it's going to take to change, it's so much easier just to do one more blast and make it all disappear again.
Wow. So Danny, when you were going through all these things, I mean, like I mentioned before, it was obvious that somebody, a family, a peer, a friend, like, hey, something is up with Danny. What support groups did you have? I mean, in these situations, I've seen people who get in trouble, into the trouble that you were in, they kind of alienate themselves from friends. Did you still have those people that, in the book, it talks about the different people came to the hospital, brought flowers, a pack of cigarettes, and $20. And hey, I don't ever want to see you again because what we did, that was crazy. And I can't go through that no more. But what other support groups did you have?
So I was a loner. There's a lot of different types of addicts. There's ones that have to be around people all the time. I was a loner. I got high by myself. I did my dirt by myself. I rarely ever had anybody with me. And I talk about it today. There was a period of 5 years where I didn't have sex I didn't care about it. It wasn't that I couldn't, I just didn't care about women. I was focused on getting high, waking up, getting high, going to sleep, waking up, getting high, and going to sleep. And that's all my world existed of. And it was a very simple way to live. And that's part of the thing that draws addicts to become addicts, is that it's such a simplistic way of life. But yeah, when I got clean, those periods, and as you know from reading the book, I got clean a handful of times and then eventually went back to the drug, or went back to alcohol and then back to the drug. Then I would go around my sober friends. I would contact people from my past. I would be involved with my family. I would go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings. There was support when I wanted the support, but most of the time I rejected it myself. And nobody wants to be around a person that's going to steal from them when they're not looking. you
right.
know, so we drive people away from us. And the only people that we'll associate with are people on the same path as us. And that's just so we can get to our fix quicker.
Wow. You're absolutely, I mean, you're at, and you know, like, wow, you're right. And I mentioned to you earlier that growing up in South Central, my mom was a drug addict. She was addicted to crack cocaine for 3 years. My sister and myself, we lived with my aunt, my brother,
Right.
and whatever family member who would take us in. And I'm glad we had those family members there around us to kind of take us. But it's kind of the opposite. You were that one that was hurting your parents and your loved ones because of your addiction. You wasn't able to identify that. You knew the pain of the loved ones were there, but your addiction was not allowing you to identify or even seeing it. And from a child's perspective, we could not control what my mom did. We were subject to her behavior, pumping gas at the gas station, getting money for motel rent, different things like that. But I mean, your book in Korea, I mean, I might as well say this publicly. You inspired me to write my book. After I read yours, I'm like, man, I need a pen and a paper. I need to start writing, because if this amazing story was helping so many people, then what I went through is helping others as well. You talked about how in the classroom you were lighting fires. I'm like, man, at a young age, this guy wanted attention, but you mentioned that you wanted to be the Tony Montana,
Right.
the soprano dude, you wanted to be that. Can you explain, Danny, just touch on a little bit how you mentioned, in the first portions of the book, heroin saved your life, heroin and jail saved your life. So kind of give the listeners a little insight into how you feel that these two, what we call horrible things, saved your life.
I don't think any medicine tastes good, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the things that are the worst to us a lot of times are stimuluses for change. And as I mentioned, the way that heroin saved my life was ironic because alcohol was killing my life. As bad as heroin is and as many lives as it takes, there was no other drug in the world besides alcohol where I would beat somebody half to death, wake up the next morning covered in blood, and not remember what I did. There's no drug. Cocaine, I shot cocaine, I did meth, I did heroin, I did hallucinogenics. Nothing caused me to act the way I did under the influence of alcohol. Not saying alcohol is bad. Alcohol is just bad for alcoholics.
Right.
And I had no ego. Sorry, the opposite. I was totally ego. I had no self-conscience when I was under the influence of alcohol. I was killing myself and I was bound to kill somebody around me. I should have been locked up for decades for some of the things I did under the influence of alcohol. So like I said, when I found heroin and heroin got me off of alcohol, heroin also stripped me of everything, all them gold rings, them gold teeth, the ego, the attitude, the violence, everything went out the window when I got on heroin. And suddenly it was just me naked, faced with myself.
Wow.
A weak, scared little boy. Heroin took all that facade away from me and broke me. So it saved my life in that aspect. It very well could have killed me, and I'm very fortunate that it didn't, because it killed almost everybody around me. Then with heroin comes jail. Repeatedly. I did 29 separate stints in jail. And I'm talking anywhere from 1 night to 2.5 years, with a lot of 30, 60, 90, and 6-month sentences mixed in between. And every time I went into jail, I would swear to God I was never going back to jail. And I meant it with every ounce of my being. And I would swear that I was never getting high again. And within 2 hours of being released, I had a needle back in my arm. But if it wasn't for jail, I would have never known what it was like to kick heroin. Wow. I would have never, the dope sickness, the misery, the torture. I would have been out on the streets continuing to rob and steal and get high. And there's a much higher likelihood that I would have overdosed, or I would have gotten larger jail sentences because I was still been out there committing the same crimes. Politically
Wow.
changed in our penal system, and they release everybody now. So when I was getting arrested back in the day, I would get picked up for shoplifting and they would lock me up and give me a $3,000 bail. My family was not posting that bail because they knew that I was an addict and all I was going to do was be homeless and steal. Now they release everybody. So we see people get arrested on Monday for shoplifting, get released, get arrested on Wednesday, get released, get arrested on Friday, get released, and they never have the experience of going through heroin withdrawal. They never have the experience of consequences for their actions. And we see the overdose numbers through the roof now because they have the opportunity to get better. And don't get me wrong, when I was in and out of jail, they didn't have anything for addicts. They didn't have these programs, but now they've got a lot of amazing programs for drug addicts. And, they've got meetings, they've got counselors, they've got all kinds of stuff. Rehab obviously is a much better option, but unfortunately there's consequences for the crimes that we commit while we're in active addiction.
Right, right. And speaking of overdose, I mean, this is a very sensitive topic, but you are an open book, literally. Well, I don't know if they call it overdose, but in the book you talk about how they called your mom and said, "Hey, your son is dead." And I know that no mother ever wants to hear that, but obviously you came back, you're here with us today. When your parents showed up to that hospital, talk about that experience. I mean, what did it make you feel like when you saw your mom and dad there with so much pain and so much hurt?
So I'd say I overdosed probably about 7 times.
Oh,
That
7. Okay.
that was the worst. I actually had a heart attack and hypothermia and was left for dead. And 2 young guys on the way to their job at 6 a.m. found my body on a church steps and reported a dead body. So the police had went to my parents' house and asked them to come to the hospital and identify my body. And then I speak in the book about when I woke up, a lady named Giselle, who was friends with my mother, holding my hand and talking to me. After I wrote the book, I talked to my mother and she said, "That's not how that happened. We were there first." So it's funny how I have this angel in my recollection. And that could be a whole different story. You know what? It's such a selfish disease, and it's such a, alcoholism and drug addiction, that you don't think about anybody else. You don't think about how you're hurting anybody else. You think about yourself. You're a perpetual victim. Everything revolves around you. Everything that happens to you as an addict is everybody's fault but your own. And only your pain matters. And that's part of the key to getting clean. And I realized once I got clean is that everything that happens to me is my fault, and that other people do experience pain from what I do. It's a whole process of growing. But yeah, at that moment in time, I didn't care. I was only worried about me. I was the victim. And, they wouldn't let me, even after that heart attack, they wouldn't let me come home because they didn't want me in the house affecting the other children, my siblings, and they didn't want me stealing from them again. So instead of feeling bad for them, I was mad at them while I was in the hospital.
Wow. And you mentioned some turning points. And I'm reading, I'm like, okay, we're going to get it together here. We're going to get it. But you went back after experiencing all those traumas. You kind of went back to your old ways. But my question is, what was that final straw? What was that one thing be like, you know what? I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. What was that moment?
If I knew the answer to that question, Jeanette, I would be out saving the world. I work in the treatment community, and I deal with people dying left and right around me, people that I help, people that I think have it, and then they pass away, and I'm speaking at their funeral. And it's heartbreaking over and over and over again. And I cannot save anybody's life. I can influence them, but I don't have that answer. And I think there's hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people out there who have recovered that just don't know that answer. It's a process. Every time somebody asks me that question, because it's a common question, it's a process. I was locked up 29 times. I went to 7 treatment centers, 7 overdoses, homelessness, all these things that should have made me change that didn't. And I swore I wanted to change. And no addict wants to be an addict. Let's get that first and foremost. No heroin wants to be a heroin addict. It's miserable. It's worse than anything I've ever experienced. But the fear keeps them stuck in place. And to break that cycle of fear, is a long process. I got beat up and dragged through the streets symbolically over and over and over again. I heard those jail doors shut behind me over and over and over again. And it was a nightmare of a life. And I still wouldn't stop. So it's a process of getting beat up and giving up. You have to surrender. You have to stop trying to control the reality around you and surrender to it. I'm a God person. So I believe that God played a huge part in saving me. I believe that there's a maturity aspect. Some people never mature, but I believe that I've matured, and it's a perception thing, a huge change in perception like I talked about. I had to realize that everything that happened to me was a result of my choices. I wasn't a victim. It wasn't other people's fault. Once I started that way, my life started to change for the better.
Wow. And you are doing a lot of great things. I've been knowing you for years now. And, I just watched you and the way you matured. You have a beautiful wife and, just an amazing life. And did you ever think that it would get this good?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, myself and nobody around me thought I would live to be 18, then 21, then 23, then 25. I mean, and even for the first decade clean, I was waiting tables, and I had no idea what I could possibly do to better my life because I'm a 4-time convicted felon. I have no skills, no trades. I screwed off the whole first half of my life. So I had no idea what was in store. I had these gifts like the ability to write, and I just thought they were worthless. And I think the major change for me was when I started to build some self-esteem and self-confidence.
Okay.
Those things were why I started drinking and using in the first place. So when I got clean and I waited tables, and then I've always had the entrepreneurial spirit. I wanted to sell drugs. I wanted to sell stolen goods. I wanted to do all those things. I was a hustler, always was. But now when I started to use it in a legal way and make money, first I started with stuff like I opened an eBay store. And I was going around to different clothing stores like Marshalls and Ross and buying, this back with Sean John and Rockaware.
Okay.
I would buy this stuff and sell it on eBay and triple my money. And then I got into selling other stuff. Then I got into selling watches, and I was doing it, and it was a legal hustle, right? And then I started a club promotion business. I did this while I was sober. For 6 years, I promoted nightclub parties. I'd hire the DJ, I'd hire the bouncer, I'd do the marketing, I'd collect the door, pay everybody, and keep the rest. I don't suggest anybody in recovery ever doing that because, as they say, you hang out in the barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. I hung out in bars and nightclubs every night of the week, but I never touched a drop of alcohol. I worked the door and I stamped hands and collected cover. That way I was removed from the temptation. But by creating these businesses, it gave me the self-confidence to move on to a more legit business. And then I had a friend that had a bail bonds company. And I said, just give me a chance. I'll prove to you that I can kill it. And I did. When I had the chance to open a legitimate company, this bail bonds company, I dove into it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, hustled and grinded until I got myself a 6-figure income, bought a house, bought a car, bought all these things that I never in a million years thought I could have. And then my self-confidence grew to where I thought, you know what, I can do this. Now I can do that. Now I can do this. Next thing you know, now I can write a book. I can accomplish anything that I put my mind to. And so that's how I got where I am.
Yeah, I mean, and it seemed like the time that I've known you, you have done so many things. Let's kind of talk about that. You've done the mission trips. You and the wife, you go on these amazing vacations. I mean, what's it like kind of using that hustle mode in like a positive capacity? Talk about some of the mission trips and all the great things that you've done to kind of give back to the community.
All right. So we got 2 different avenues here. We'll talk about Agape projects first. Ironically, talking to you, I've always been in self-exploration. So I explored every religion. I've explored every avenue of fitness, every avenue, everything there is. And so yoga, they had a yoga studio down the street from me. And I went and tried yoga out. And I was a probably 28-year-old dude in a class full of 45-year-old women sweating and shaking, and they were killing it. I was back there dying. But it was a cool experience. And I started doing yoga all the time. But I say that to say that when I left that class, I felt open. Like they say that when you stretch certain areas of your body, you're opening parts of your spirit, like you're opening your mind. And I felt a certain kind of way when I left that class, and I sat in my car and I was like, you know what? It's time in my life. I remember sitting in the 7-Eleven parking lot and I thought, it's time in my life where I need to give back. I need to start fulfilling my mission. I've gotten to a place in my life where I can afford to do that. And I thought, I want to help the children of addicts. The children, just like you said, how you came up, the children shouldn't bear the responsibility for the parents' mistakes. They
Right.
didn't get born into that situation. And they're likely to repeat that situation if they're not given the same opportunities as their peers. And so just a small gesture, I took 2,500 and I took 50 children of addicts who were either incarcerated or overdosed shopping for Christmas. And of course, I got a high off of it. It's a new high now that I'm addicted to, and that's helping people and that's giving back. But I shared about it, and a whole bunch of people said, you know what? Next time you do that, we want to sponsor some children. And so it grew to 250 children, and it was on the news. And then I got such a high off of it and such a good feeling that I started doing other work with the homeless and other work with addicts, and somebody's house burned down and I helped rebuild and I helped raise money. And then this project came up and this project came up. And then at the same time, I had a desire for travel. I never thought I'd leave Baltimore, right? I never thought I would ever see the outside of Baltimore in the state of Maryland.
Mhm.
So when I had the opportunity to go to Mexico by myself to a yoga resort, I fell in love with traveling. And so I realized that the way I could incorporate traveling and giving back was through these mission trips. And that's how that was born. As you know, I've done like 18, and I think I've led 11 of those 18 to
Wow.
almost every country in Central America, as well as Haiti and Peru.
Wow. Yeah, I remember seeing those trips, and I'm sure once this COVID pandemic dies down, you'll be able to do those things again. And I am pledging to be there with you guys because that was always one of my aspirations. I mean, just seeing you
Yes.
guys at the airport with all this luggage, you over there in the other countries and interacting with the locals. I'm like, man, that is an amazing gift to give back to the community that way, going and doing all these great things for people who can never repay you. That's what it's all about.
I encourage anybody to do that once in their life. Look, do I think there was ever a mission trip where the people that we served got more than we did? Absolutely not. It is the biggest blessing for yourself.
Right.
I can go down there and give money, give time, give sweat, give blood, you know what I mean? And it will never amount to the reward that you yourself get out of serving. I think
Exactly.
it's my new high. And would I serve others if it didn't feel good? Probably not. I tried to be honest. Like, I've had a discussion many times. Is there a possible way of doing anything that's 100% selfless? And I don't think it's possible. We get something to everything that we do, right?
Right.
And this is my thing. It's my hobby and it's what I enjoy. And travel, compound that with travel, and it's a win-win situation. And I look forward to having you with us because there's nothing like it.
Yeah. What's next for Danny McGhee? What's next for you, the wife, the business? Are we going to get any more books from Danny? I mean, I'm sure there's so much more you can tell us, but what's next for you guys?
All right. So what's next is St. Thomas next month. That's what's next. We got married last year in Mexico, and it was the week that COVID started. And so if we would have got married a week later, we wouldn't have had a wedding. So that was awesome. But we didn't get to do a honeymoon. We had 50 people with us in Mexico. So we wanted to go to South Africa, but that's a little risky right now with COVID still lingering. The laws and the flights and everything, it's just too much. So we're just going to dip off to St. Thomas next month. But
Oh,
in the
wow.
big picture, as I mentioned before, politically, bails have gone to the wayside. So I'm full-time real estate now, and the market's insane. So I'm hustling sun up to sundown. But I wrote 3/4 of a second book. I just haven't gotten around to it. To finishing.
Oh, okay.
It's called Falling Towards Heaven.
Oh, wow. That sound, I mean, after reading this book, I mean, I'm like, wow, we want to hear more. We've heard a lot about the challenges that you've been through, but we want to hear more greatness from Danny. I mean, because all the things that you've been through, even before reading your book, I really do believe that if God is not ready for you, you ain't getting in. And he
Right.
wasn't ready for you. He knew you have Danny so much more to offer this community. And like I said, you are a big inspiration to myself and just all the things that you have done. I mean, I think the sky is not even the limit for you. I mean, beyond the sky is so much more in Danny McGhee, but just before we wrap up here, just kind of give us a little bit of, if someone wanted to contact you, I know you have the book Chasing the Flawed Sun, you have social media outlets. what are some of the community interests that you have right now? I mean, COVID is kind of putting a damper on everything, but what are you dipping into the community?
So as far as Agape Projects goes, our wintertime is our big season. I'm pretty much through everything that we usually do in the wintertime. I have the Valentine's card thing coming up where we're giving out Valentine cards and gift cards to the homeless that I do every year. It's one of my favorite projects. I will be organizing a mission trip for probably early summer. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to Costa Rica, which is my second home. I've done one mission trip there and it went very well. This is going to be an interesting one because it's going to be half mission trip, half vacation. We're going to do like 3 days of service and like 3 days of chill.
Okay.
Go to a waterfall, go to the beaches, it's going to be a mix and match. And what I'm doing is I'm taking 4 addicts in early recovery. We're going to have them submit videos, like 30-second videos, like they used to do for like Survivor in the real world, and pick the people to take with us. And we're going to pay for those trips. So I'll have like 8 regular people and then 4 addicts in early recovery, because I want people in early recovery to experience the world and what's out there, and also the humility of servitude. I think it'll be absolutely mind-blowing for somebody that's never been out of Baltimore like me to, maybe have 60 or 90 days clean and is struggling through life to go somewhere like Costa Rica and serve the less fortunate and also experience paradise. So that's my dream, and I want to try that and see how that goes.
I think that will be amazing. The first bonus that I think will come out of this would be perspective finding. You take 4 people who are struggling with an addiction and you just introduce them to a whole new world. I mean, and their perspective be like, wow, this is what I could be doing.
Right.
Did it? Perspective finding. I mean, I think it's wow. I mean, that's just amazing. That's very creative to give someone the opportunity to see another part of life, especially someone that hasn't even been outside of Baltimore.
Right.
That's just going to be amazing. And wow, as we close today, I just want to thank you again, Danny, for sharing your story. I mean, this is just an amazing journey. I have always thought that I'm like, wow, you have so many people. Some of the things that in reading your book, I'm like, wow, some of the things that he experienced within a short amount of time, people don't even get that far.
Right.
They end up losing that battle. And you just, it was just a roller coaster ride, sometimes nonstop.
Sure was.
Wow. But thank you, Danny. Like I mentioned before, thank you so much for sharing your story. And, I'm sure our listeners are going to be very encouraged. And I've seen you read a lot of the letters, on social media that were sent to you from people who are going through your prior struggle and read your book and became very inspired. I mean, and you have to definitely accept yourself as being an influencer, a big time influencer.
I want everybody to pray up for my guy, Kareem. He's the one for the most. I got a letter from him about 8 months ago. He's locked up on murder charges. He's been in there for 30 years. Both of his parents, his brother, his son, everybody to overdoses while he's been in prison. And this guy, I've been corresponding back and forth, and they may release him on parole to come to the drug treatment program that I work for. I've been pushing for him. But I know. When I read somebody's words, I know when somebody's talking the talk or when somebody's real. And I'm really excited to meet this guy and walk him through the process. I can't even imagine what he's going through.
Mm-hmm.
Make a bad decision when you're 18, 19 years old and have to spend the rest of your life in jail for it. I hope he gets that break because I can't even imagine what he's dealt with.
Well, I would definitely remember Kareem in my prayers and, wish for the best for him. But I guess this has been so inspiring. I mean, you have no idea, but I'm sure that's the greatest reward, touching so many lives and just going on, sprinkling that little bitty amount of encouragement and just to help somebody, make it through another day. So thank you so much, Danny, for being here. It's very, very important that so many people hear this story and just learn from it and just grow. So I look forward to continue watching you and all the great things that you're doing for the community of Baltimore. And once the next book come out, and we definitely want to have you back on, because we want to hear more. We need this encouragement and we need this blessing. So thank you so much, Danny. And thank you to all my listeners who have supported me throughout this journey. and join us on the Speak Inspired Love and Leadership podcast. Be blessed.
Thank you so much.